Good evening, everyone. I'm Tom Kulaga, Executive Creative Director of the New York Times live conversation series, Times Talks. Welcome to tonight's installment of ScreenTimes, which hosts exclusive screenings of the most anticipated new movies, followed by conversations with top film talent. I want to give special thanks to the presenting sponsor of ScreenTimes, HBO, and share the following brief video message.
These tapes are the next big thing. Who knew that they were lighting it up like this?
It's a new start, if you want it to be.
One more trip around the sun for the Martino brothers!
And now, please join me in welcoming our moderator, New York Times theater reporter Michael Paulson, and our special guests, the co-stars of Judy, Renee Zellweger and Finn Wittrock.
So I guess you guys liked it, huh? Congratulations to both of you.
Thank you.
So why don't we start by talking about the ending? Obviously, any film about Judy Garland is going to have to grapple with Over the Rainbow. How did you start to think about what to do with that song, when to include it, how to include it, and what would it mean for you to tackle this song that is so iconic?
Well, started by not thinking about it in that way.
Yeah?
Yeah, that was not allowed into the conscious mind at any point. Oh, well, let's see, where to start with that big question. Rupert was pretty certain about where it would be and how it would be played with respect to how she was performing the song at that period in her life. And yeah, I guess, I don't know, it was one of the most moving experiences in making the film. We had spent about a week, I guess, at the Hackney Empire in East London filming the musical numbers, 5 days, I think, something like that. And this was the final number. And in between the shots and in between the different numbers, I would sit on the stage and talk with the actors who played the audience. And we'd share stories. You know, I was at Talk of the Town, or my mom was at Talk of the Town, and oh, did you know this about Judy? And we would just trade stories, and it became this really active expression of affection for her and appreciation, really. The whole experience was this very fluid celebration, and that moment felt like sort of the culmination of all of that love. And thinking about the difference in, I don't know what that song must have meant to her when she sang it so early on as a child, and the hope that is written into the words and that is in the notes that she sings at that time versus now, and the period that's in the film, that she still sings about hope, and it almost seems more powerful considering what it is that she's grappling with at the time. I don't know, the hope never leaves her. It's just maybe a different color. It was very moving, very moving.
Wow. It's moving to watch.
It's also, I think it's a bit of a true story of when Judy did lose her voice or emotionally was overcome, and the audience came in and helped save her. And that's like a real moment that happened where people stood up and sang the end of that song. And these extras, background performers who were there that night were really genuinely moved, and they stood up and applauded on their own just for Renee's performance. It's really an amazing thing to watch.
So let's dial back, and each of you tell me how you got involved with this project and sort of what gave you pause and what excited you as you thought about whether this was something you wanted to embark on?
Do you remember?
Sure. If you want to say.
Well, mine's probably very different than yours. I put myself on tape in my living room for the part of Mickey Dean's. I didn't think I didn't know much about it except that you were playing her and that was kind of enough. And then a few weeks later, I found out that I got the role, and then suddenly I was in London working with Judy Garland. Really, that's how I felt. I did a fair amount of research to get into it, reading Mickey's book, but also most of my job I felt was to fall in love with Judy, and that's kind of the best homework assignment you can have. I watched a lot of her movies, and we talked a lot and shared research, and suddenly I was in love with her. So yeah, that was my job, you know.
Right. Renee, how did the project come to you, and how did you decide? What was your thought process about whether to do it?
That was a big sort of consideration, was why, you know? Why did they send it to me? David Livingstone, who's the producer, he sent the script, and I read it, and I was very moved. I didn't know very much about the circumstances that, were, the difficulties that she was dealing with at that stage in her life. I knew very little about the final chapter of her life, actually, and so I was very moved, and it made me very curious. And David invited me to London to just talk about it, because I didn't consider myself that kind of performer, and so I didn't see how I fit into this, into the idea of this project. But I was really curious about why they wanted to make this movie and why they wanted to focus on this chapter in her life, and I really appreciated their purpose in wanting to contextualize the circumstances that she was sort of trying to navigate those difficulties toward the end of her life, to sort of subvert the notion that she was this tragic person, when actually she was quite heroic, really.
Right.
Very courageous, and yeah.
The screenplay sort of lets us think either way about Mickey's role in her life, whether he's genuinely in love with her or taking advantage of her. How did each of you come away thinking about that relationship? And
yeah, I'll go first. It's an interesting thing to start to research Mickey Dean's, because he was kind of a character in the shadows for a lot of the end of her life, and there's very differing opinions on who he was and what his intentions were. If you read Lorna Luff's book, she's pretty suspicious of him, what he was really after. But then again, you kind of realize that they weren't really that much in contact at that moment in her life. So to hear him tell it, he was truly head over heels for her, and idolized her beforehand, but then they kind of developed a relationship that's kind of conflated in the movie. It's a little bit longer in real life, how they kind of their courtship. And then he was the one at the end of her life who was there. They bought a house in the countryside in England.
In Chelsea.
Yeah, Chelsea. Yeah. Oh, it's Chelsea. And then he was the one who was there when she was overdosed at the end of. He found her in the bathroom. So I think that they had a real, genuine relationship. I mean, I think there was drama and chaos and tumultuous fights and heartfelt reunions, kind of. I think that's kind of how they operated. And she wasn't an easy person to be in a relationship with either, So it's a little tit for tat there.
Yeah, there were a lot of differing accounts on what people thought of him, their opinion of him, and whether or not he was good for her. I liked your choice to play him as who she needed him to be, and how she saw him to be.
Right.
Because I think there are a lot of moments where it's very endearing when you hear her correct a journalist and say, "Mrs. Deans, please."
Right. Yeah.
It's
And dedicating certain songs to him. And
yeah. There's a sweetness there, I think.
Yeah.
That he was important, very important to her. Yeah.
And I think he sensed that she needed sort of like a jolt of energy in her life, and I think that's what he kind of brought for her, for better or for worse, you know. Yeah.
You've both alluded to the amount of research that you did. What do you think was the single most valuable thing that you looked at or read or learned about her?
Oh boy, that's hard to say. The way that Rupert described it, we were mining for treasure, and I just look at it as a series of experiments. After going to England to have initial conversations about what they were hoping to do with the film, we just started trying things. And we didn't stop. We just kept trying things with the different departments, trying this wig and that makeup and doing a photo shoot and try this song, now try it that way, and these clothes, and everyone sharing these bits of information that would come up as little surprises that seemed essential to collect and apply in some way in conjuring her essence, A lot of the video that we saw on YouTube and the books, the autobiographies, the biographies, everything, just so much fascinating material. Thank you, Internet.
YouTube. Amazing.
Yes, amazing.
For acting research.
Yes, it's so true. And one thing would lead to another. There are these wonderful fan sites where people are sharing bits that might have been just in their personal archives, kept private forever. And there was this one interview that I saw that I believe was in 1965, maybe. It crosses over in my memory now, but that Barbara Walters had done with Judy and her two children, Lorna and Joey. And it just, there was something about it that when I would watch it, and I watched it again and again and again, that struck me as so, telling about her vulnerability at that time. You could sense that there was fear when she sat on that couch. You could sense that she recognized that a lot hung in the balance of this interview, and her not being misrepresented or misunderstood, and that I don't know, it left me feeling so much empathy for her, and also kind of anger, really, because I felt that, but wait, it seemed to be blanketing the circumstances of her life at that time as, I don't know, there was sort of a very sad, there was a suggestion of something that being very wrong in her life in some way, and I felt like I wanted to protect her somehow. I wanted it to be looked at in a different way, perhaps, to have empathy and a better understanding of the truth of her experiences versus what had been written about her at that time, or speculated about, or whatever it was, and to recognize that the things that were challenging her at that period of her life were often not of her own choosing, but because of decisions that were made for her so long ago. Anyhow, it struck me as a really important moment in terms of what she was experiencing at that time in her life.
Yeah. And what about you, Finn? Obviously, you must have had less archival material to work with. How did you go about finding what you needed to?
Yeah, I found a little bit of footage of Mickey and Judy together, which was actually very informative. You just watch them for a few minutes, and you sort of get this whole dynamic very quickly. That he's a little bit like nervous in his own skin, but also it feels like he wants to be a part of the spotlight, but also is sort of scared of it and shies away. Doesn't want to do too much. I'll say the thing that, it's nothing to do with Mickey really, but the thing that I would listen to in the morning was her, if you've ever heard her Carnegie Hall live performance, there's like all these interviews of very famous people who were there that night who all said it was the most incredible theatrical experience of their entire life. And there's no, as far as I know, there's no video footage of it, but there's an audio recording of it. And there's just something that she's channeling in that that is just really powerful, incredibly powerful. And you just wish that you had been there that night. And so that's a thing. Like that was a way in for me of like understanding the immense power of this woman and just trying to like just be there for her for a second in her life was enough. Yeah.
Finn just alluded to her, crazily famous voice. You, as far as I know, did not sing professionally until Chicago, right?
True?
It is true, right?
Oh, God, yes.
How did you think about, this must have been intimidating, thrilling, exciting, scary, to take on this role in a film that, as I understand it from the get-go, was committed to having you doing real singing. How did you tackle that?
Again, with the denial. Really just not thinking about the magnificence of her gift, or just setting that apart, putting that aside, and not acknowledging it ever. Ever. I just tried to look at it and tried to intellectualize it and break it down into some sort of, to look at it stylistically, to look at it so that I could apply some kind of a methodology to understanding better her performance style. Because there are certain things about her performance language and her vocal characteristics, I suppose the way that she sings, the style of the day, the way that she pushes through a consonant, the way that she goes nasal here, and just the way that she never lets go of a note and she pushes through it at the end, just things that are recognizably definitive in terms of Judy's style of singing. And I thought, right, let me familiarize myself with those things, and then I'll just do these other things on the side to make it possible to hit the note that belongs in the song, and not this other thing that I don't know where it belongs, but not in public, that's for sure. And trust in that, and that was pretty much it, and it was ongoing throughout the process.
And you took vocal lessons.
Oh, yes.
What kind of exercises, what was your routine like?
My niece was visiting, and I came out from finishing a lesson, just a Skype, a FaceTime. I didn't have, one day I did a FaceTime at home. She came out, and my mom was laughing. I said, "What's funny?" She said, "Ava, what's happening?" She said, "It sounds like dying whales." So something like that.
Lots of support.
A lot of that. I just, I didn't believe in that. I didn't know that was a thing. I didn't recognize that this was a muscle that you can manipulate and that you just have to work it and abuse it a little bit to build it up. I didn't know anything about that. I thought you're 6'2", you're 5'4", and that's the way it is. But, I've learned, I can do a little work here. So,
You said in an interview with the Associated Press, there are certain things about her experiences that I understand, having lived the life inside Hollywood. Can you explain a little about what aspects of her experiences you particularly understand?
Well, sure. I mean, I understand the schedule. I understand how both thrilling it can be and thrilling and depleting it can be. And I find it extraordinary that she was able to sustain over such a long period of time, considering the things that she was, the difficulty that she was navigating at that time. Well, for so many years, because I know what it takes out of a person when it doesn't involve live vocal performance, when you are not exhausting your body physically with every performance that you give, without addiction issues, and having more agency over the decisions that are made for my, I don't know, professional experience. And, you know, and I've had a public persona for a little while now, and I understand the difference between the narrative that is projected onto that persona and the truth of the human's experiences. And so when I was reading about her, and I guess the accounts of what was happening in her life and the sort of pejorative nature of the articles about her when she was in this chapter, final chapter of her life, and then in her passing, I felt that there's more to this story here, that there's always more to it. There's something that was, I don't know, I would say that in the omissions of her critics, a lot of the truth of her life must certainly have gotten lost. And the truth of the human experience behind, you know, is standing in the shadow of this icon since she was a small child. I felt that, you know, I don't know. I felt that there was some misrepresentation, certainly, in those omissions, if that makes sense. Yeah, so like that.
So you famously stepped away from acting for 6 years. Can you talk about what you learned during that time and why you decided to return?
Yeah, it was necessary. I needed to step away. I needed to step away. I wasn't healthy. I wasn't taking care of myself. My priorities were a little messed up. I, you know, wasn't leaving room in the equation for my humanity. Most of the decisions that I was making on behalf of, you know, I don't know, just my work, right, and not for, you know, my personal experiences. And I wanted to learn something new. The gratitude was sort of gone. I was sick of myself. I'd be working and I would hear the lines coming out of my mouth as I was speaking them on set, and I felt like I was just regurgitating the same emotional experiences because for 20-something years, 25 years, I guess, I've been living in from set to set in someone else's house, someone else's clothes, someone else's body sometimes, someone else's voice, whatever it might have been, and not learning anything, not having authentic human exchanges as myself. So I don't know that you can be a compelling storyteller or interesting as an artist when you're not expressing something new out of necessity because you've had an experience that moves you in such a way that you need to comment on it with your art. And I felt like, you know what, either I need to go and live a little bit and grow as a human being and find a new way into this, or I should say that was wonderful and be grateful for it and grow as a human being and find out what you're supposed to do next. But you can't keep doing that because that, by the way, I couldn't sustain, not as an artist and not as a human being with the way that I was going.
And why did you return?
Because I love it.
Finn, one thing that people might not know about you is that you grew up around theater. You grew up in Western Massachusetts, and even after you moved away, you spent all your summers at Shakespeare and Company.
Wow, you've done your research.
I've done my research. Do you think that kind of training in the kind of very classical world, like, means anything about the world of, like, being a movie star and making Hollywood films?
I think so. I would say just doing Shakespeare, I think, gives you a kind of broad spectrum of humanity. You know, you work muscles that you don't work in normal life, and you push yourself to places that you don't normally go. And so I think it gives you like a kind of like it's like you're working out muscles in a broader way than you would in doing anything else. And so I think it does help in film because you can hone in on certain of those the wide parts of the spectrum that you wouldn't otherwise, and maybe can jump from doing different kinds of characters, different kinds of energies, whatever, rather than kind of getting stuck in one pattern.
Yeah.
And also for this movie makes me really appreciate how much work it takes to do what Judy did, for instance, and come out every night. And she would not really have a script, you know. She wouldn't really know, even, she didn't want to rehearse. You see in the movie, you know. She would just kind of come out, and then for 2 hours, people were just entertained by Judy Garland, and she would just, that's so hard to do. Who can do that, you know?
Right.
So yeah, it gives me, I think it gives you an appreciation for the craft that you might otherwise take for granted in lots of ways.
Yeah. Renee, the director of this film is a theater director. He runs a theater in London, Rupert Gould. And I think you've said that working with a theater director was a different experience for you. You said he pulls the emotion out in different ways. What does that mean?
Well, it's not so much about the text and understanding the subtext or the narrative, but it's about connecting to the emotional experience, and he wants it to be palpable, you know. He likes to put it on its feet in a different way, not just marking the blocking of a scene or what feels natural and bringing it to life, but he wants it to be sort of imbued with the emotion of that is representing that moment. So, for example, when we were rehearsing the first number, the By Myself number, in the piano store upstairs, above the piano store in a little space, you know, he said he wanted for the struggle, because, you know, Judy had this way of expressing herself through the words in these songs and sharing what she's feeling, so that, you know, I mean, she could connect to the meaning of a song like nobody and make you feel like she's singing to just you, and she understands you and she sees you. And she, at this point in her life, having lived those songs, you really feel that she, you know, she's singing her own experiences. And Rupert was very clear that he wanted for this moment to reflect where she is, and for us to not be sure whether or not she's going to succeed. And also her defiance, her refusal to give in and give up. And so he wanted for this feeling of the resistance that she's trying to cut her way through in life, to be in my bones, as foundational beneath the choreography and the performance language and whatever it was that we needed to set up for the shot and the day and the singing itself. And so he said, okay, so come over here. I'm going to sing the song, and put your hands on the piano. This Baby Grand. And so I here, like that. He says, right. Okay, then the music starts. And he's like, okay, so we're singing. I sing. Okay, so I'm singing the song, starting, and he's, now push the piano. Push the piano. Just keep pushing the piano. Don't want you to stop pushing the piano until we finish the song. Just push the piano, push the piano. And he would just coax me through. And his, the sense of the urgency with the struggle would intensify in different places, depending on what it was that he was hoping would be, you know, the emotional content of that performance. I mean, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very cool, right?
Yeah. We've talked a lot about her pain. One of the other thing that comes through in this film very strongly is her sense of humor. Can you talk a little about how you found that?
Oh, essential.
Yeah.
Anything that you read or see about her, especially, you know, when she's so witty.
Yeah.
She's so witty, and you have to be so smart to be that funny. Now, and that was really important to me, that be properly represented in the script and in the scenes. Every chance we got to sort of stick a little, you know, show a little bit of her wry, sort of dry wit. She could hit him back like the best of them with a spin and a sting. Now, and that was so unusual. She was a lady, you know. She was broad on those TV shows with the guys, you know. She could go toe-to-toe with the fellas on television. And, I mean, she's magnificent. Just one in a million years, you know. Yeah.
Did you really stay in character all the time?
Well, we were laughing that we weren't really ever not on set.
Yeah.
You know, you would go home and go to bed, but you can't because there's so much more to dig into and the homework for the next day. So it felt like it was always going, and we were surrounded by it, all of her material and the legacy of her work. It was very much alive in this series of experiments that we were sharing. Her music was playing, or there would be, the vocal performances or interviews and photographs everywhere all the time, just all day, every day. So it felt like we were all sort of in character, weren't we?
Yeah.
We were all sort of feeling her essence with us throughout the experience.
But it's fun now hanging out with you more in life, or doing all this press stuff. I'm now realizing how different you really are, because I was pretty much always hanging out with you, with the Judy Renee, and now I'm seeing the Renee. And you are really different. I mean, it wasn't like you made us call you Judy. It wasn't like she was like, I won't respond unless you call me Judy. But in retrospect, I'm like, right, I feel like you always had at least one foot in her, at all the times. Because on film sets, there's lots of logistical stuff to figure out. You can't just be in character and call me in my dressing room. There's always people touching your face and pushing you around and putting mics on you. But it was a great lesson to see how you kept a part of your psyche sort of always involved in it while you were dealing with all the other logistical chaos of a film set. So thanks.
Can both of you or one of you tell us the story about the kiss gone bad?
Well, we can tell them now because they've seen it, so they
Yes.
won't be looking for it the whole time. That was hilarious. I didn't know about prosthetics. Did you?
I mean, not like that. Yeah.
No.
I didn't know how hot it could get in London on a soundstage where they don't have air conditioning, and what that can do to a prosthetic nose.
So you were wearing a prosthetic nose.
Special. Yes, there was.
Yeah, we didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah, we didn't talk about it because we didn't want anybody to go, where is it?
Yeah.
There it is. So I didn't realize that the glue that goes underneath this latex, which has been form-fitted, and the whole process, fantastic, Jeremy Woodhouse, fantastic makeup artist, Rob Crafter, right?
Yeah.
Incredible, these guys. But the glue, it tends to, when it gets warm, it liquefies. And then it doesn't have any place to go because the latex has been, molded to your skin with the alcohol, melted into your skin. But if
you wouldn't really notice until there's a moment of real wild intimacy, in which case a piece of that nose could come off on the other unsuspecting party.
Yeah.
And she says, "Oh, there's a piece of me on you, darling."
Yeah. Or the liquefied glue, which we affectionately came to term the nose milk, would run. The first kiss was just horrifying. It was horrifying. The kiss, and it went, and it was on his cheek. My hand went up to his face.
Yeah. Very tender touch. And then she told me later she was taking off the nose milk. Yeah.
All right, well, the film is released tomorrow, and so why don't we close? Why don't each of you tell me what you're going to be doing tomorrow?
What, you're working, aren't you?
I'm going to be working, but
You're working on the next film?
Yeah, which is good. I'll just have my mom tell me how everything's going. Yeah, she's going in LA with a bunch of my friends and cousins, so I'll get the full report from my mom.
That's nice.
And Renee?
That's nice. I'm flying to London, so
Great.
yeah.
For the release there.
I think so.
Somebody will tell you.
Go where they tell you.
Well, thank you both so much for being here, and congrats on the film.